Thanks so much to both the Jeffs. I'm delighted to be here with you all, and I particularly wanted to thank both of you though for your leadership on this issue. Really, it's a thanks to the whole room. What you've just described, Jeff, is really a case of this precinct, these businesses, these leaders really leading a civic discussion over quite some time. And on behalf of the government, I really want to thank all of you for that, but I also want to particularly thank both of you for that. I also want to acknowledge in the room former Minister Stuart Ayres, in particular his role in driving this agenda along over time. I particularly want to acknowledge his support for South by Southwest. We caught up, it was late at night, not very late at night at South by Southwest, to compare notes on how it was travelling, and I think it was a great moment for the city. So I want to recognise Stuart Ayres' role over time as well. Jace Tyrrell, thanks for the work you've done while you've been out, and I'd also acknowledge the 24-hour Commissioner Mike Rodriguez, who's here with us, and Kerry Glasscock from the Sydney Fringe, part of the Ministerial Advisory Panel for the Government's Arts, Culture and Creative Industries Policy. I also, of course, would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Aboriginal land and pay respect to traditional owners of the lands and waterway where we meet, to pay respect to elders past and present. As Jeff said, this has always been an important place of meeting, and the evidence is all around us. Just across the park outside Middens, mounds of shells accumulated over generations have been unearthed, and I think it is always worth recognising as we meet here that this has been a meeting place for generations. That was certainly true last week as South by Southwest gathered, and I thought it was a big moment for the city to have the creative community from around the world descend on the ICC, descend on this precinct and really share their knowledge, their enthusiasm, their energy. And I thought for the first year of that festival, that conference, it really was a very strong start. I want to start where Jeff Parmenter started, to acknowledge the continuity of this discussion. I'll try and give some views today. I would like to talk about the government's vibrancy agenda, partly because I'm excited about it, partly because I see it as highly relevant to the aspirations you have for this precinct, but I'd also like to talk about the view the incoming government is taking to the Improvement District strategy and how we will fit in with, but also drive the continuity of the discussion that you have described. I want to recognise the success of the work that's been done already. The activations taking shape here really have been quite exciting, and recognise and acknowledge just how far you've got already. One of the things, as the Premier appointed me to the series of portfolios I've got, was a recognition of bringing together the sort of agenda that we're dealing with here. Bringing together arts, music and the nighttime economy, along with jobs and tourism, was organising the machinery of government to reflect the sort of agenda that you have driven here in this place. I do want to acknowledge that transport and active cities adds another level to the strands of cultural life in the city altogether. All of that is a recognition that the culture of a place is what makes it a great place to live, to work and visit. Now, I know that's not a new view to anyone here in this room. That's not a new view, but it isn't always how government has organised itself. And that's exactly the point of the arrangements that the new government's put in place. I do see the transport portfolios as a key partner in the activation of civic life, and that's been one of the early priorities for me as a roads and transport minister in the government. And the reason for that focus is because we are in a war for talent around the world. Every one of you knows that. I recently spoke in the Parliament to say we've lost creative workers. Greater Sydney, on recent reporting, is the only capital to see a decline in its workers in the creative workforce, working artists, musicians, writers and performers. Those reports had other capitals growing between 32 and 96%. There is a war for talent going on in the world. This is a crisis, turning that round, and it is one of the reasons why the government is acting in this area. It is a key reason driving the vibrancy agenda, what we're referring to as the vibrancy agenda. Last week, we introduced the 24-Hour Economy Legislation Vibrancy Reforms Amendment Bill and the 24-Hour Economy Commissioner Bill. This is the reason I spelt out in the Parliament as we did that. Over the past 12 years, New South Wales had forgotten what it was like to be a state with music on every corner and vibrancy spilling out onto the street and into public spaces. The philosophy of the change is to support venues and festivals, make entertainment economically viable, and give venues in particular an alternative to simply relying on pokies or alcohol sales. Sydney's lockout laws have proved particularly problematic. In the end, they became a global embarrassment. And that's the inescapable conclusion from an era that saw Madonna barred from her own after party since she arrived at 1:45 a.m, that saw multiple venues with mirror balls banned from hanging from the ceiling. That was where we had got to as a city. Banned because they might lead to dancing. That's where we've come from. As a result, we've had three key issues. We've been missing live music spaces, missing creative workers, and missing what I think is crucial to any city and any great visitor or nighttime experience. And it's something that we saw back in spades last week. This is why South by Southwest was so exciting. Walkability and venue hopping. That idea that you can go to multiple places in an easy way from place to place and really have a great experience in a way that you don't quite know how the night will unfold. And to me, that's the most exciting bit of the vision that you have here for this precinct. The cooperation you'll bring will drive exactly that agenda back into this place. So thank you for what you're doing here. 5 changes will make up these reforms. Firstly, we're tackling the sound and noise issues in the state. The great Sydney sport of moving in next door to a pub and then trying to close it down, we are putting an end to with these reforms. The single neighbour serial complaint will no longer trigger a process that can close down a venue. You'll need 5 people who are affected in order to be at the threshold where a venue will close. And to me, that's a really important change. Everyone will have the right to ask for help and ask for a good night's sleep. Everyone will have the right to ask for mediation. But to close a venue, the single neighbour serial complainant will no longer be able to do that in New South Wales if these laws are passed. Secondly, we'll back the vision that you have called for over time of bringing precincts right across the state. We'll strengthen the special entertainment precinct model. We do believe we can make it much more effective. There's only one in place in Enmore Road, and essentially this government wants Enmore Road for everyone. It won't be the same in Penrith or Parramatta or Tamworth or Wagga, but that model of having a regulatory environment for precincts that's suitable, we do believe should extend across the state. We'll strengthen the role of Mike Rodriguez as 24-hour Commissioner. There's a small team sitting behind Mike. I think that's appropriate, but he's got to deal with some very big agencies in government. So having that role reflected in the law, I think would strengthen that role, appointed by Stuart as former Minister. But I think now's the time, after that success, to be able to strengthen that role. I'm just going to... Two other changes that I'll refer to. We do want to back in further changes to the use of private and public outdoor space. And finally, we will then turn to a broader discussion across the city about the role of nighttime workers, how the city works for nighttime workers. So that's a quick summary. I raise it today because that is really about changing the regulatory environment to make what your vision for this precinct is possible. Those changes have been introduced to the Parliament. They're yet to pass the Parliament. Ensuring that they pass the Parliament before summer is an important step in driving this agenda, and I'd ask for your support in making that possible. I do see it as a real boost to consumer sentiment, to business sentiment ahead of summer if we can make those changes through the Parliament. Secondly, I wanted to talk about improvement districts. Many of you in the room would know them as BIDs. As an acronym, I'm not quite sure if that ever really worked. Too close to getting a property ready for an auction, perhaps, another great Sydney sport. A little bit of a focus on building rather than what was being built. The way that we're thinking about describing these is less as business improvement districts. We'd now like to move towards describing them as community improvement districts. In my view, what businesses are building in taking the steps that you've outlined really are communities. And that's a lot of the way the government's focused on these problems about precincts around the city. This is a change about who's doing the building. That's a business improvement district. That's really about who's actually driving this towards what is being built. And what you're building when you work in the way you want to work is a community. And that's the change we'd like to make, to talk more about the benefit you are bringing as you get organised, rather than simply who is doing this. So that is consistent with the sort of precinct thinking we're trying to drive across government, consistent with the community approach that this government is trying to drive. But that is the way we'll start to talk about these districts. I did want to give a little bit of background about why these districts are sitting in the transport area. The Cities and Active Transport Division delivers on a suite of strategies, policies and plans that integrate and guide long-term land use, transport planning and the design, delivery and management of transport, including, of course, walking and cycling. The most important parts of that agenda are often about public space, they're often about street activation, and they recognise that streets serve as the glue that binds communities, businesses and properties together. So I'm very excited to have the transport team driving this change. I think it's hugely helpful to have that big agency with its very professional approach, with this crucial team driving that change. And I, of course, wanted to stop and recognise Carolyn Butler-Bowden, who's here with us today. Now, she's had some big news recently, which is in very good news for the city, but bad news for transport. She's been appointed as the next state librarian. It might be a good chance to thank her for that. So I did want to recognise the incredible work, Carolyn, that you've driven in your time in the transport area, but also to reassure the room, as I've been reassured, that there's quite a strong team within transport driving this agenda. So it'll certainly be a real priority for the government in an ongoing way. But I look forward to what you'll be able to do at the State Library. When it comes to these community improvement districts, we will still see them as places where businesses, landowners and communities work together to deliver agreed initiatives and projects within a district boundary. They're currently usually formed in a high street or town centre, and people work together to create strategies and plans. They've often included things like landscaping, shopfront activations, seating, signage, public art, outdoor dining, as well as events and festivals to future-proof town centres. They've brought together businesses, property owners and local governments to grow local economies, high streets and local centres. In the past, they've operated at different scales, allowing for flexibility that suits both metropolitan areas but also areas in the regions. Best practice improvement districts will typically take a longer term view on economic vibrancy and the quality of life in their districts, and they'll do as you have done, gather the data to do that, think about the marketing that needs to take place, fundraise for the long term, but they'll take that long term view. I'm pleased to announce to you today at this summit that the government is a step closer to the next step of reform in this area. We will be releasing an exposure draft of legislation for community improvement districts before the end of the year. The work will build on the white paper published last year and the policy paper earlier this year. The current process of establishing one of these community improvement districts in New South Wales is still uncertain, and that's why we feel we need to take this step, a step that's been advocated for by all of you. The improvement districts are not recognised in legislation. There are no guidelines on how they should be established and administered. Instead, there is a patchwork of regulations and hurdles that must be navigated before one can be commenced. That is the task which we're seeking to tackle in introducing this exposure draft to the legislation. It is an opportunity to simplify the process to establish community improvement districts in New South Wales. In the same way we're tackling the vibrancy reforms, very complicated reform in that area, I want to acknowledge this will be quite a complex area to get right. It's got to suit not just this precinct, but a whole lot of other precincts. So this will be a complex area of reform. It will take the time to be able to consult properly with the community. But the message here today is very much, this will be proceeding. We do want you to have certainty here. I am keen to move very quickly, acknowledging the early work you have done. So that's why the government is moving at this pace as one of its early priorities. We do want to get the model right as we do this, and we'll take the time to go and talk to other areas about it. I went last night to the Uptown Pitch night that the 24-hour team was holding, where districts from around the city came and talked about what was special to their neighbourhood, how they wanted to talk about their neighbourhood and invite people to their particular part of Sydney. It was a very exciting night to see those businesses gathering together as part of the Uptown program, getting organised to talk about their local areas. One of those, the Chippo district, centred in Chippendale, was really talking about how they'd like to take a next step of moving towards some sort of membership model. And it really was almost a description of this improvement district model. So one of the things the government will want to do is make sure that whatever legislation is driven, in the end, both fits this area here, but is also relevant to an area like that. That's the challenge that we've got to meet, something that's flexible enough to meet both those challenges. The step we've already taken as a government is to open the Community Improvement District Pilot Program on the 16th of October. The pilot program's a $2.75 million grant program that aims to seed fund the establishment of community improvement district-like entities across the state. Funding will range from $150,000 to $400,000 for councils, incorporated associations and companies limited by guarantee within New South Wales. So important steps forward on this agenda. Look, that really reflects the early priorities of the government, but also the very direct view that was put to me in opposition and then since in government by the team here to say we don't want to wait. The businesses here are ready to move. The investment here is unfolding and there's more ready to go. So that's the reason why we are keen to move and drive this quickly. It is part of an attempt to lift the city. This is an amazing place to live, but I think anyone who lives and works in Sydney knows the potential is even higher. That is the goal of the government, is to help New South Wales and Sydney reach its potential. The work you're doing here is a crucial part of that. I think it's so exciting, and you can see how the potential of this precinct the potential of this place in the city, again, is much, much higher, even though it's a remarkable part of the city already. So thank you for what you're doing. It's why we're driving this agenda quickly as a government, but I look forward to seeing how it unfolds over the years to come and the summits to come. Thank you.